That's how it begins, by saying you're a skeptic? Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Who here has heard of Tomb Raider? Yeah, I thought so. Who hasn't heard it? Yeah, okay. So obviously you guys were really excited to be here, Alex and myself. We just got back from a press tour. We announced the game not long after the holidays. So we had a lot of questions, primarily why, right? Why do it? And we're hoping that after today's presentation, you'll get an idea of why we did it and why we feel so strongly about it and why we feel it was a good idea to begin with. Alex, you're gonna have to help me out with the slides here. Note taker. We actually tried something kind of cool. We downloaded an app on the iPhone that allows you to change slides, but it failed. So Alex is going to go old school. So yeah, the idea of Tomb Raider multiplayer, or at least Tomb Raider with friends, is not really new. If you guys play Xbox Live Arcade, you guys have heard of a game called Tomb Raider, Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light, right? Who's heard of that game? Who's played it? I'm guessing if you've heard of it, you've played it, right? So it introduced, thanks Alex, way to go. Yeah. So yeah, for sure, it introduced players to the idea of Lara, maybe playing with another character and another friend. And for us, when the reboot or the reimagination of Tomb Raider, next. You know what? Let's just show the whole thing. Yeah, there we go. So that's obviously the Guardian of Light. I highly encourage you guys to play it. It's a lot of fun. It's isometric. It's on Xbox Live Arcade. Give it a shot. It's co-op. So when Tomb Raider's reimagining started about 4 years ago, they had already seen how popular Guardian of Light was, and the idea of doing multiplayer came to light. Maybe an idea that originally tied co-op or competitive multiplayer, but it essentially gave the players an opportunity to play with their friends in the Tomb Raider universe with Lara and other characters. But Crystal, who are the guys taking on the single-player part of the game, had so much to bring Lara's new story to life. So basically, Jason was saying Lara's grown, but really in this one, she's back to being 21. It's the story of Lara coming to age, to the characters that you guys have gotten to know with the Tomb Raider 1 in 1996 on. So they had so much kind of responsibility to tell Lara's story that if they were going to do it, right on the bat they decided that it couldn't be done internally. They couldn't put the team together fast enough, and the experience just wasn't there maybe, and that focusing on the single player campaign and the challenges they were going to have for that one was going to be more important. That's where IGDA Montreal came to play. So we came into the picture about 2 years ago. The discussions early on were about, what can we do with multiplayer? Is it possible? It was not a decision that was forced down on us. We debated whether or not it is possible, and if it was interesting, not just possible. Everything's kind of possible, but do we want to do it? It was so important to get the franchise up and going again, right? And Lara's story was so important that we didn't want to just do something to do something. And that's a lot of times when we announce multiplayer, they're like, oh, you guys are doing it just to, keep people from selling it again, or keep people from, making more money with DLC and blah, blah. That's not true. It's not true because the team that was put together, which I'll talk about later, I'll let Alex go on with the design in a bit, was put together specifically for that, with guys from all sorts of experiences, from all sorts of studios in Montreal. And that's the advantage of being in Montreal, right? You have a lot of studios, a lot of great talent, a lot of great projects, and we have the opportunity to talk to all of them, and some of them might be interested in joining us and our project. So for that one, we recruited a very, very special team to put it together. Before we go on to that, though, I'm going to let Alex take it on and tell you a little bit about our design process and how we took what was being done in single player to multiplayer. Want me to do the clicking? I'll do the clicking, because I'm good with that.
Okay, so like Joe was telling you, I'll quickly do an overview of the vision and the design for Tomb Raider multiplayer. The first part I'll do is obviously the vision, and I'll start by talking about the single player, what were their vision, what was the origin of the project, because I think it's important to understand what we decided to do for the multiplayer. So, like Joe was saying, around 4 years ago, Crystal decided to reinvent Tomb Raider, and they set themselves two objectives. First was to tell Lara Croft's origin story, and try to create a more modern version of the Tomb Raider gameplay, really bringing it to something that will be a step forward for the franchise. With those two goals, what they came up to, what would be the theme of the game, is A Survivor is Born. They decided to make it about a survival story, to make it about, that's Lara's first adventure, so it's not just about raiding Tom, it's more about how she became that adventurer, and the aspect that forged her the most is that survival aspect that she had on that strange island where there's a lot of threat, where she'll need to face different challenge. So that was really the theme that they pushed for, that drive their production and design. And that's directly something that they were using on their side to really make sure that they were keeping focused, that they were really building what they were calling that survival action that would be really interesting, but that would also really fit with Tomb Raider. So they had that mantra that no matter what we create or how we create it, we must not forget the core mechanics and pillars of what makes our Tomb Raider experience unique. So what they had are those three pillars: dynamic traversal, disparate combat, and smart resource for Lara. It's really, for each one of them, a take on what was the classical pillars for Tomb Raider and how they made it more interesting, new for each one of them. So when they were talking about dynamic traversal, it's really how they took the platformer and make it more current, making it more organic, being able to move about in an environment that is more dynamic, organic. There's way more complex environment to navigate in, and also more dynamic, falling bridge, on really bringing it a step further. Same thing for the combat. They really decided to take a big step forward in the combat, changing it a lot, and that's one of the elements that was really important for us, and that was one of the starting point that made it possible to really say that could be really interesting to do as well in multiplayer, since they were changing the combat, improving AI a lot, creating game mechanics that were going a little bit more far away from what were before in Tomb Raider with auto lock. So it was more about a shooter, but a really intense one where they had that aspect that it's really a fight for your survival. And the last one is how they decided to approach the puzzle in their Tomb Raider, which is the smart resource for Lara, that also we decided to use a lot because the approach that they took is really related to the environment. They wanted to have something that was feeling more natural to the player, using fire, physics, water, so wind, all those elements that were part of the environment, and making the environment really important in the game, since it's one of the elements that is really important is the island on which the game takes place. So basically that was the vision that they were having, that was the game that they were building for single player. And it's from that we came, and really how we passed from single player to multiplayer, how we decided that it was a good element, that was something that fitted for that game. So, as I was saying, single player is really a survivor is born, and for multiplayer, the team that we found that was there is surviving together, because in single player, Lara is not alone. She's there with other survivors that are really striving to survive on the island. And that team really drive a lot of our decision later. That's why you'll see when we'll talk about some of the mode, some of the combat, why we focus on that survival aspect. So the mode that we created is more about surviving, trying to get out of the island. It's less necessarily about getting relics, artifact, because that's more Lara, it's specific to Lara. The survivors that are there with her, it's more about getting out, surviving. So that drove a lot of our decision in the project. So the other element, once we had that team that surviving together, we wanted to make sure to have a good vision on how we would be able to bring it to the player. And the element that we used, kind of a guiding phrase, is familiar yet different. The main reason why we decided is, first, we wanted to be familiar, since it's the first multiplayer with competitive aspect in Tomb Raider. We wanted to have something that would be easy to jump in for the player. We wanted something that, since it's reusing a lot of the single player mechanics, but also some of the elements that is easy to get quickly for players that played other multiplayer, that they could dive quickly into it. We didn't want it to do something that was too remote from what was done before, to make sure that it was easy to go from the single player to the multiplayer. But at the same time, it needed to be unique. We needed to have that special something that would stand us apart. So that's the second part, where get different. So we really try to push as much as possible the survival theme, and the way we did it is really with the hunter versus hunted thematic in the modes, in the theme, in the way that we were building the tools and capacity for each of the teams. Also, we focus on the 3 pillars that we already talked about that are really core to the Tomb Raider franchise. And just to give an overview quickly how we divided it, like for single player, like I was talking, those are the 3 pillars that are separated pretty much evenly. That's more what was the goal at the beginning. Of course, for multiplayer, we knew that it was mostly about player interaction, so that combat aspect, that conflict, would take a bigger place in multiplayer. So that was what was the vision, what drove us to really start digging in multiplayer, and the approach we took at the beginning. So what we'll do is we'll cover for each of those points how we decided to try to bring it to life, to make it interesting and unique for the player. So the disparate fight aspect, what we wanted is really to bring something that would have that intensity and desperation. And the way we built it is through asymmetry. We built asymmetry in the weapons of each faction, but also in the objectives. And that way, it was closer for the from the survival teams, since it created more extreme situation for the player. And like I was saying, it's hunted versus hunter. So the enemies, the people that were already on the island, the Solari or scavengers, we built them in order that they were using more hit and run. As for the survivor, it's more a question, since it's more a question of survival, it's about collaboration together, staying together. And like I was saying, we did it with the weapons and the objective. So for the weapons, what we did is Solari had more long-range weapon, low rate of fire. So it's more a question of quickly doing high damage and going away to really have that hit and run aspect. Survivor had more close range, spray, high rate of fire, weapons like shotgun, SMG, so that they were able to defend themselves when someone was close. It's really to have that quick dynamic aspect, which we'll see later links also with the fact that the traversal is so important in the game. I was talking about the mode, and I think I can go a little bit deeper for one of our modes that we already talked about to the press, which is the rescue mode. And I think it's interesting to see how we decided to do it so that it was supporting that hunter versus hunted aspect. In the mode, the objective of the mode for the survivor is to go get some medkit and bring them back to a base. And once they have enough, they win the match. On the side of the Solari, their goal is just to do some execution. So it's the first one that reaches their objective that will win the match. And what was interesting is, since it's asymmetric objective, different for each team, we really pushed to make sure that they were creating for each one a different experience. So for the survivor, what we're seeing, it's really promoting cooperation. To survive, they must stick together, help themselves, and it's something that resonates with the single player. So the special element we give in that mode is for survivor, they could revive each other, so that brings them to try to work together more. Also, the one that is carrying the medkit is more vulnerable, but he sees enemy. He's not able to defend himself. He cannot shoot. But since he's able to communicate to his allies where the enemies are, they need to work together. And that one also, I think it's interesting to see how we developed it. It's one of the elements for the revive. We had different iterations. At some point, you could revive yourself without the help of someone else, but we realized that it was spreading too much the survivor. They didn't have that aspect of working together. So we decided to give that aspect where someone else needs to come and revive you. On this Solari side, like we were saying, it's hit and run. Since we had that aspect where you're able to, you need to execute the enemies once they are down. One of the aspects that we did is really to make sure that there was movement, hit and run. You need to go in and do a melee kill. And that's another aspect where we did several iterations to find the right elements. We did several things. The idea of having just a melee attack going up close to finish them, to score a point, was not there at the beginning. But once we were testing the match, progressing with the mode, we realized that we were missing that hit and run aspect. and it's there once we added it, it really gelled together and come forward as something really interesting. So the second pillar, dynamic traversal, it's really something that gave us the opportunity to do something different in terms of level. We really pushed the verticality in it, since we had several tools from single player that was allowing us to do it a lot. In single player, there's zipline, ascender, pickaxe climbing. That's some of the example, but there's all the classical platforming move that Lara is able to do. It's really an agile aspect of the game where she's really good to navigate, and we bring it on our side. Sorry. But to do that, that wasn't that easy. We really needed to be able to create something unique in terms of level, and that's something that at the beginning we had a lot of iteration before we really were able to find our personality in terms of level. So we have here, it's one of the early version of one of the level in gray block, and we wanted to have it because it's really easy to see with it all the difference in terms of layer. As you can see here, there's 5 layers in the map that the player can access, navigate, navigate together. So what it gives them quick access up and down, high vantage point, and what we don't see there, there's also access to underground. So in reality, there's even a 0 layer there. That element also asks us to revise a lot of the element that we directly add from single player. That was a challenge to make sure that it was working properly, because there's an element that we couldn't isolate as much easily than in single player, is that you're always in conflict with the enemies. Since it's player versus player, there's always that aspect of combat. So we needed to have it way more dynamic for certain aspects than what they had in single player, even though it was already dynamic. So 3 of the elements that we needed to modify as we were progressing. The first one is for the climbing. We did some tests and we needed to make it faster. The second one is one that was a real challenge during the production, which is the cover system. In single player, they have really an interesting system that worked really well for the game, which is a kind of an automatic system where Lara is taking cover automatically. For us, however, that was trickier because the player were always under the impression, once they were undercover, once the character was taking the position of cover, that they were safe. But since the action is faster, and as you can see, there's a lot of verticality in the level, it really gave a false sense of safety for the player. So we had to reconsider how we were doing it, and we went to a system where it's based on the decision from the player, where he can go and crouch to use low cover. Because what was happening, the character was going next to a low wall. The character was doing an automatic cover move, and as a result, he was just getting sniped by someone way higher, and that was frustrating. He had the impression the game was telling him, oh, you're safe there, just like in single player, but he was not, and we didn't have any way to prevent it since it's player versus player. So we changed that aspect, and it really solved a lot of the element. The last point, it's pretty a more simple one, where we needed to, when we saw with a lot of navigation, the height, the action can move around, player needed to be able to move faster, so we needed to add a sprint that's not there in single player. So those are 3 examples of small changes, small tweak that we needed to do in order to make sure that it was working properly for multiplayer. Yes. So the third pillar is smart resourceful. It's really the aspect where we wanted to have, it's really important in Tomb Raider that the puzzles are there, and having puzzle in multiplayer, something that is competitive, it's not something that you can easily place there in the pace. So the way we approach it is just to make sure that being smart is as good as being accurate. If you use the environment, if you use the tool in a smart manner, it will give you a good chance to be able to win. So some of the examples that we did to be able to have that aspect where the player is able to outsmart his enemy. We give really different tools in the loadout, several traps where you're able to place fake ammo box so the player will think, other player could think there's ammo there, but it's a trap, it explodes. Same thing with mines, dynamite. Also a good variety in terms of projectile to make sure that there was all those options there. So that's fairly standard, but we try to push it as much as possible. The other aspect is really the one that gives us a different feeling where the environment is way more important. The picture is really dark. So that's one of the examples where there are several traps in the environment that the player can go and set up, prepare. And that's one of the elements that you often find in Tomb Raider and that we did, like, even though the game is quite a fast-paced one, it was really important for us to have that aspect where you can use the environment to your advantage, that you can set up those spike traps, snare traps, and try to outwit your adversaries, use that environment in a way to be able to win. So, and it's kind of the same spirit that came to the point where we added elements that were similar to traps, but with a bigger scales. In the map, we had what we were calling game changers, where the player is able to trigger an effect that will affect the whole map, impact all the player. One of the examples that we see there, and again, that's always related with what what single player was talking in terms of using the environment, wind, fire, electricity, all the environment of the island. One of the example, what we see there, you're able to activate a bell that once it rings, it creates a windstorm, a sandstorm that will impair the vision of all your enemies. Since it's something that could change the outcome, it doesn't just impair the vision of everyone. The team that triggers it is able to see the enemy easier. So it's really some element that gave a way to be able to tip the balance, whatever was happening in the match. If someone managed to use it to be smarter than the other, they have a good chance. So all those elements were really important for us to be able to retain that smart, resourceful, that kind of puzzle aspect that is so core to Tomb Raider. And that's an element that we had to work a lot because it's not necessarily something that you find in a lot of multiplayer. It's really something that we push for ourselves. So finally, that was pretty much the overview for each of the pillars of how we approach it. But we talk about some of the elements like the asymmetry, the verticality, traps, a lot of tools that give us a lot of content, which bring us to the last section for the design aspect as itself, which is for the balancing. Thanks. We knew that if we wouldn't be able to achieve a tight balance, we would have a lot of issue in order to have really a good game, a successful game that player would enjoy. It was important that it was balanced, but also that it was perceived as a balanced game, which is often not necessarily exactly the same thing. It could be balanced. Sometimes we had some issue like that where even if our data was saying that it's balanced, both team, both side wins as often, people didn't have that feeling, so we needed to find a way to address it as much as possible.
Most of the time it was unbalanced when I used to play, because I'm just really good.
Joe is a typical example of if he's not winning, it's not balanced. So
you guys remember when you play a multiplayer game, like in Call of Duty or Halo or whatever, and then you play against that 5-year-old that completely obliterates you every time? I fear him, and I've become him on the team. I trash talk, all that stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
in the Q&A, if you want example of trash talk, I'm sure that Joe will have a pleasure of giving example of what he's saying to the team. And I'll spare you the hours I needed to explain to him that some part of the game were balanced, but he was just not good enough. So, aside from Joe, the challenges that we had is asymmetric modes, asymmetric weapons, and an element I haven't mentioned yet is that we have the player progression. You level up, unlock new weapon, unlock new tools, unlock new skills. So all those elements were making us, giving us a bigger challenge in terms of being able to have a balanced experience, which it's more complex. So I'll quickly go on an overview on how we tackled each one of those challenges. The first one, but before, just we'll do an overview of what are the tools that we add to balance, what were each of the tools that we were using, and after that I'll go for each of those subjects, what was our balance philosophy for each one of them. Yeah. So first element that we were using is daily team playtest to be able to have rapid iteration. Every day we were having playtests within the team, not everyone playing, but always a different player as much as possible to be able to have rapid iteration, and that's something, especially early in production, that was extremely important because that's the moment that we could do the most changes, and we were not able to wait for other type of feedback. Like we also had external playtests, but we needed to be able to iterate way faster than that, so that's one of the elements that we really use, daily playtests within the team. The external playtests that we were having player from outside coming, more in a focus group idea, that focus idea was more, we did it early, but since it was less regular, it was way more for the fine-tuning, tackling that aspect that I was mentioning, where it's not just a question of being balanced for real, but making sure that the player was perceiving it as balanced, and making sure also that it was accessible enough for the player, that they were understanding whatever the side they were playing. So, and the last element that we use is studio-wide playtest. We had a couple of them during it, and the goal there was two sides to it. Obviously, one more on the tech side to stress test the fact of having as many players that we were able to gather. But for the balancing aspect, it's more to make sure that we have a situation where it's more a different mix of player. What happens when people join quit game, when you have an uneven group, how the game is holding up when it's 4 player versus 3, different type of levels, different type of skills, which to compare it to the external playtest was trickier because when we do external playtests, we have 8 player that comes in and they stay for 3, 4 or 5 days, but they all start at the same moments and play together all that time, so they all have the same progression. So it was important for us also to have, in the studio-wide playtest, it was easier to see what was happening when there was people that were playing for several months, day after day, with player which was pretty much at their first experience with the game. So that was important for us as well. And the second part of the tool is the matrix. We had tools that allowed us to take each map to see if we were able to analyze how the match were playing, making sure that the flow was good, that the hotspot that were happening were at a good balance, that they were playing like we intended them to play. And that was really useful. And different type of data that used for balancing, but other aspect of the production as well that was really useful for matchmaking and optimization as well. So like I was saying, we had 3 bigger challenges in terms of balance, the asymmetry for the modes, and I'll link it to the maps as well because they are so tightly linked together to make sure. It was important to make sure that we had something good. So the first step that we were doing is rapid iteration in terms of layout, and that's with the daily playtest that we were adding that I mentioned. So the step that we were doing, first we were setting the most promising layout. So often there was several layouts that were being made in gray block extremely quick by the level designer. And we were playtesting them and quickly seeing, oh, that has potential, that has less potential. So we were able to focus on what was the most interesting. And once we have one that we felt was at the potential to go. And at the beginning, of course, it took way more time. As we were advancing and doing more maps, it was easier because we had a better idea of what was the recipe. Even at the beginning, the example, as we were doing some tests and exploring what was exactly the spirit of a Tomb Raider multiplayer map. We also tried to do similar layout from other games, and that's an element that was interesting because some people were saying that's a good map for Call of Duty multiplayer. Let's just do something similar. It must certainly work, and that's where we saw that we had such a different game because it wasn't working at all. We needed to have something that was unique, and when I was talking about verticality, that was the aspect that is so different in our layout. So when we had them, we were able, when they were just in gray block, to iterate extremely quickly. And the approach that we had is really doing the general changes. First step is usually knowing, is the size of the map feel good for the modes that we have? After that, we were working on the flow, making sure that just navigating it felt right. People were able to find their way. And then the last aspect is more about, is the objective placement good? Does that make sense? Will it hold for the balance of the mode? So that's really the first aspect. The second aspect is more with the fine-tuning, and is there with the external playtest, studio playtest, that it more objective positioning, making sure that it was working properly in terms of where were the traps, the ingredients. That's where we did some adjustment, light layout adjustment, and path readability. So that's really the approach we took to the balance of the modes and the maps, because both were so tied together that we were iterating on them at the same moment. For the weapons, as I was saying, we had different weapons for each of the factions, so that gave us also quite a good challenge, because that means that we needed to make sure that from one side to the other, it was clear. So what we did is to make sure that each one had quite a clear strength and weakness, which one is long range, which one is short range. So that was our first step in terms of physics, to make sure that they had really a specific aspect. And we coupled it to make sure that nothing was becoming too powerful or out of hand, that you had a counter for each one of them. So if there's a situation where you feel that because people on the other team were sniping too much, using crossbow, bow, they were taking too much advantage over you, they have the option to equip, they choose a defensive skill, which will protect them against arrow or against bullet, against something. So they need to choose. So we had more of a kind of a rock, paper, scissor approach, where people, if they choose the right loadout, can make sure that they retake the advantage afterward. And again, the key there was the rapid iteration, and for the weapons, we often did it even faster than the level, and that's something that was really important, so that the tools were able to support it, that the changes were fast enough that when we were just two-player, we were able to do some modification live in the engine, but also just to tune value and be able to apply them directly in the other match. So there was no delay between each iteration. We were able to play a match, change some value, and 5 minutes later we were testing it again with 8 players to see what was the outcome. And that was really the key to reach a better balance quickly. The last aspect, it's the progression. In the game we have 60 levels the player progresses through, and he unlocks different weapons as he goes. And we needed to make sure, that means that the progression was balanced between player, that between the player low level and high level, there was still a balance that was making sense, because we know that in the end when people play, there will be mixed group, different part of progress, and we don't want to end up to a situation where it's just frustrating because you're the only one at low level, it's only high level player that in your group of friends, and if you want to play together, it sucks because you're not high level enough. We didn't want that to happen. So one of the elements that we did is to make sure that we had a really wide variety in terms of rewards. So that gave us a smarter range between the player in terms of result. They were keeping more closer together because whatever was their style of play, they were getting reward. And also, what we're in a sense saying that we were giving XP for participation. Even if you are losing, even if you have a hard time in the game, you'll still have reward, you'll still be able to progress and unlock new stuff. That was really important for us. The other elements, we had the asymmetry between two factions, and as you progress, what we did is really we took from the survivor and the Solari, as they progress, they have more options, and it was bringing them more closer and closer together as they progress. So they start really different, and as you level up, you have more options that bridge the gap between them, so that gives a different twist and keep the balance between both factions. And our approach that we took for the new tools, new skills, wasn't just an idea of you start with weak stuff and become stronger stuff. What we wanted to do is that you have the more general tools, is it in terms of grenade traps, the ones that are more easy to use but are still powerful at the beginning, and the ones that are more specialized, that require more mastery of the game at the end. They are not necessarily stronger, but if used properly, they give you an edge on the other player. So that way you don't feel that it's too hard for you in the beginning, so since we give the tools that are the easiest to take at the beginning. And we'll go back to Joe for the process.
Thanks, Alex. Let's give Alex a hand. Yeah. And now the fun part, production. Who here wants to be a producer? Awesome. Don't do it. No. Keep your hands down. You don't want to do that. Yeah, so as you can see, there was a lot of thought process that went through our head when we were doing multiplayer for Tomb Raider. Right off the bat, we weren't going to do something that was going to go head-to-head with Call of Duty and Halo and the battlefields out there. We wanted to do, let's say like you're playing Tomb Raider, and you've heard about multiplayer before, but just like people like me who intimidate little 5-year-olds, 15-year-olds, to remain politically correct, you feel intimidated giving it a shot. So there's a lot of games that have done it before, a lot of games that have added multiplayer well, some others not so well. Tomb Raider is a franchise that has a lot of following. Obviously, a lot of you guys have heard of it. But at the same time, it introduces a new facet to playing together, which before hadn't been seen in a Tomb Raider universe. And for a lot of you fans, you probably haven't had a chance to play, let's say, a multiplayer. Well, maybe not you, but a lot of Tomb Raider fans wouldn't have played a hardcore multiplayer game. But that's not it, right? But that is how I personally see it, as the gate to a big hardcore multiplayer game if you wanted to give it a shot. I am still intimidated by playing any kind of multiplayer on console. I was a PC gamer at first, so I'll play Battlefield on PC with any of you, anytime, but not on console. I'm too freaked out with the controller and the players that play that game. That being said, the process for us when we decided to do it was, let's give an opportunity for players to create their own stories the same way that Lara does it for her single player story, right? You're learning Lara's story, but once you've completed the mission or in between the story, you want to play with your friends. You want to have some memorable experiences with your friends. You want to talk about it after. You want to get on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and just talk about, hey, did you see that trap that took out that guy? That was hilarious. He was hanging there for half an hour, and I just watched him there, and he couldn't do anything about it. It was awesome. And that was the ideas. And honestly, like, we've played the game every single day, just like Alex said, and we still have stories. Like, literally yesterday, we were playing the game with a bunch of guys from the press that are actually reviewing us. So if any of you guys are press out here, we love you. Remember Metacritic? We love you too. That being said, yeah, so we were playing, and again, like, you never get these experiences sometimes that just get, a game that gets down to the wire, right? A game that you feel is going one way, and then with all these tools that we add in the game, all of a sudden you can switch the momentum and just get the game back in your hands, and it happens every single time. And here's where this press tour that I talked to you guys about earlier was really cool, was that once we've had a chance to explain the ideas behind what we did in multiplayer, and we've had a chance for people to play the game, they understood what we were talking about. And this is where a lot of, you get an announcement for a mode that you're not probably used to it. You're going to say, well, why, right? I'm just going to buy Tomb Raider for single player, which is why it was also important for us to say there are two very talented teams that are working on them. Because there's a team that are focusing entirely on your experience as Lara, and the other team, us, who are giving you opportunities to experience the game and the universe with your friends and talk about it on Facebook and blah, 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 and all that. So the process for us is, right off the bat, once we decided, hey, there's something in there with everything that Alex just told you that we can do for multiplayer, let's really make sure that we got everything on our side. Let's hire the right team. So a lot of us actually come from, games like the ones that you've seen out here, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have played, and a lot of them were made here as well. Deus Ex, obviously, Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, Army of Two, yeah, X-rated game of mine. But again, a lot of experiences in all these pillars that Alex was talking about: the platforming, the multiplayer, the gun shooting, the covering. Everything in there has some importance into what you do to bring a multiplayer experience in the forefront and allow players to have fun and to understand what it feels to play multiplayer, but in the context of a franchise, like Tomb Raider. So again, we went out, we got the most talented people that wanted to join our team. We made sure that everybody had the same vision, that the vision was aligned. We made sure that, just like Alex was explaining to you guys earlier, everybody bought into it, everybody agreed to it. Nobody wanted to be on a team that was not convinced about what they wanted to do, and that's exactly what we did in the get-go. Came up with a good idea, and then started building levels and building experiences for the players to have fun in. But, obviously, how did that go? I'm just gonna show it all. So obviously Alex was talking about the vision. It was important for us to understand it right off the get-go, understand what was important, what was going on in Lara's world in single player. How do we make it so that it's a seamless experience from single player to multiplayer? Because again, it feels very easy for you to get into a cycle where a multiplayer is just tacked on. It's a little check in the back of the box. How many times have you guys ever heard this, right? Multiplayer is like a little checkbox in the back. We did not want to have that. That wasn't the goal, and seriously, you can ask Stefan right here, down to the wire. If we were not convinced that this was going to be good for the product, we were going to cut it. Seriously. And that would have put a lot of us in a bad place, but we got people to play it. They loved it. And all of a sudden, we're like, well, we believed in it, and it got to where we wanted it to get. Obviously, it's important, like I said, to have two different teams, preferably in the same building. That wasn't in our case. We were in different countries. But it was important for us to have both teams focus on what the priorities were and focusing on the quality, which was probably the word of the project. Quality. Is it at quality? Is it going to get to quality? Can we get to quality? Which says, by the time I'm done with the project, if I hear the word quality for 3 months, I'm going to shoot myself in the head. But that's the way to do it. That's the way you need to do it. You need to come up with, a confidence in the fact that you can achieve quality, that you can hit your mark, that you will be proud of what you do, and you're not doing something just for the sake of doing it. Because that's not the point. And on a franchise like Tomb Raider, it can hurt. If you do something and on a reboot, nonetheless, it can hurt you. If you do something that you're not sure about it, there goes your reboot, and there goes Tomb Raider, and there goes everybody talking about it, how it wasn't a good idea, and it wasn't good, and blah, blah, blah. So, obviously, you start with saying we're going to minimize interdependencies, which means minimize how much each team needs the other. That's what an interdependency is. Always easier said than done, because sometimes it's easy to do a multiplayer. Just take a couple of people, stick them in a single player, big area, and there you got multiplayer. Clearly not, and God, have we learned from that one. But keep constant communication, right? It is one team. We are one project. We are shipping on the same disk. Tomb Raider is it. There is no Tomb Raider here and Tomb Raider there, multiplayer, single player. It is part of the same project. Understand that is extremely important, that single player and multiplayer are two very different games right from the start. Forget about how much can we reuse. That doesn't exist. There is no reuse for multiplayer except maybe the skins, even those have to be optimized. There's a couple of guys here from the art team, they'll tell you how hard that was. But getting something directly from single player, especially when they're trying to keep a fidelity that's so high to allow one player to go through that experience, you can't bring it to multiplayer without some adjustments. And sometimes it's better to start from scratch than to try to port something directly from single player. Obviously, the optimization MP limitations, know them from the get-go. Know that if you're trying to go with a game that's going to ship 4 against 4, 6 against 6, 64 against 64, etc., you got to set your limitations right from the start and build your game on top of that. Don't go with, we're going to try this here, then we're going to try that there, because everything is dependent on your technical limitations of your engine and what you're trying to build. That's what it is. It comes down to basically you saying, this is the direction we're going to do, we're going to make it the best experience for that, and do not change course. Obviously, any of you guys that are developers here, you know how much feature creep or changing course midway is a disaster, right? Which for multiplayer is even worse, which is where that interdependency is important, because on a game that's constantly evolving like single player, you need to know exactly at what point do I say I cannot count on what is being done on single player. Did you guys hear that? It was like a max down. Really? Well done. I was like, oh my God. It's Metal Gear Solid, right? It is Metal Gear Solid. That's awesome. So yeah, understand your limitations and understand that you got to build the highest quality, knowing from the get-go what you're trying to achieve, what you can achieve, and what you want to achieve, and do not veer off course. Clearly, with every project, there are challenges. What are the challenges? We were still very, I would say in our team, at least for us, we were still dependent on each other for a lot of things. We try to reuse a lot, but at the end of the day, you know, and like a lot of things that you do, you end up getting better with time. You end up learning from your mistakes. You end up learning what to do and what not to do. From the beginning, we really tried to minimize time by thinking that we could reuse. But as we discovered, things that were being built for single player did not work directly into multiplayer. So for a lot of times, we had to rebuild from scratch. Yeah, thanks, Alex. Mechanics, and that is one thing that I'll tell you is a nightmare, because a lot of times we're like, yeah, just take the melee and put it in multiplayer and it works. No, it doesn't work that way. Networking, right? Two players need, who connects, who gets the hit, who gets the kill, one player hits the other. You visually see that they're both connecting at the same time, yet one person gets the kill. How do you show that to the player that, yes, it is you that got the kill, you get the point, etc. It's very easy to get frustrated with that. And if you guys have played multiplayer games before where there's lag, that is frustrating, right? Next little challenge. Again, how different? What can we reuse? What do we create from scratch? I said create a lot of things from scratch. It does work, but obviously the biggest constraint in reuse is what? Is time, right? We don't have years and years and years to build a game. So there is opportunity to reuse in certain cases, but you need to figure out right off the bat what is least expensive to reuse and what is least expensive to start from scratch. Layouts, for example, was a great example. We thought, yeah, you know, let's give it a shot. Let's take a single player area that looks like it's big enough to accommodate 10 players, 8 players. Put some players in there and let's see how they play. Forget it. Optimization on these levels didn't work. Getting our objectives in these levels didn't work. Creating a brand new layout from scratch took us less time to balance and get it done than taking an area that worked in single player, that looked like it worked in single player, and putting it in multiplayer. Who said wow? There you go. Seriously, it is wow. But you know, we and this is the thing, right, is that you need to try sometimes. Who knows, right? In games like Call of Duty, it's probably easier. And the one thing that's really important as well, try to get your development of multiplayer or co-op or whatever game that requires more than one player or player versus AI, right in your planning from the get-go. And that means development at the same time. Because basically I don't remember where I saw this, either from you, Alex, from someone else, that levels basically and mechanics need to be built for multiplayer right off the bat and then adapted for single player. It's easier that way. Because then your AI, for example, is a great example. Co-op. How does co-op work? Co-op is basically 2-4 players playing together, and the AI has to adapt to that. Did you ever see an AI what it does when it's like confused between what to do and who's it supposed to attack, right? Army of Two was a game I worked on in the past, and that was one of our biggest challenges. We had 2 players, only 2 of them, and I saw the AI do the weirdest things. It would go for one guy, then no, you know what? Screw it, I'm going to go for that guy, and then no, I'm going to go back to that guy. Disaster. From the get-go, design your game based on the biggest challenges you're going to have. If you're going to do a co-op game, take that into consideration. If you're going to do a multiplayer game, take that into consideration and build the game around those challenges. Don't make it an afterthought. Separate executables, yeah, sorry about that. Separate executables, what does that mean? Do you ship with 2 EXEs on the disk, or 1? You guys know what that means, right? It is a big answer that you have to get. It's a question you have to get from the get-go, because it means working on 2 different branches and basically shipping with 2 EXEs. So what that means is that right off the get-go, you're minimizing a lot of what you can use between two teams, SP and MP. So if you decide to do one executable, then you got to depend on and this is where communication is important. Sorry, I got thirsty too, Alex. Much better. Right, so from the get-go, minimizing interdependencies means that if I decide to ship with 2 executables right off the get-go, I got to split my branch and I got to basically work completely alone. If I keep bringing things back from the other branch, which is single player, there's a lot of work to be done to adapt it to work in multiplayer. So at that point, what do you say? Am I going to keep one executable and work off what's being done in single player, or split the branches and work with an MP branch and an SP branch? It's decision you got to make early on. Time difference and distance, obviously, like I said to you guys earlier, it would have been fantastic to be in the same building. That is, daily meetings, phone calls, video conferences, which we did a lot, but 3 hours of difference between us and San Francisco, Redwood City is where Crystal Dynamics is it's not a lot, but it's if you think about it, we get to work, they get to work. Basically, by the time it's lunchtime on our end, they're arriving. So it's not exactly the best scenario, but sometimes that's what you got to do because a lot of studios are all over the place. But ideally with Montreal, who knows, right? That was where we were. And this one is for Jason. Jason, where you at? You somewhere? You had asked me before, or actually you posted it somewhere, that you're interested in Lara's evolution. There she is. From the first Lara in 1996, all the way to our Lara in 2013. Yeah, let's give it a clap. Seriously, Lara Croft, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Spans what? Spans like 90, who's good at math here? 96?
96, 97?
96 till 2013, that's how many years?
6.
Don't laugh, Fred, you're a programmer, man. You're supposed to know this stuff.
No, was it 97?
96 was the first Tomb Raider, and then,
I don't know.
what is it?
All right, so if you have questions,
17
raise your
years?
hand and I'll come run over with the microphone.
Yeah.
Which decision did you make and when did you make it?
We shipped with one executable. For the simple process of, I don't know actually why we did that. Because it was a decision, because it was this, don't laugh. I know what I'll do next. Fred, do you want to answer that one? For compliance. Fred, our lead programmer, ladies and gentlemen, right there. Fred has not slept since September. Probably. Yeah.
All right, next question.
So, how many people do you need to be to play the game, and will AI fill up the missing spots?
No. Alex, you want to take that one? Go for it.
It's 8 players, and no, it's only players. We don't have AI to fill in when there's not enough player. That's something that wasn't possible in the timeline we were having because, like Joe was mentioning, to make sure that AI was working properly when there are several players that could be split between 2 teams, that ask a lot of work, and we wanted to make sure other game does it, but I think few games does it really well, so we wanted to make sure that that's not something we wanted to be there and just be half done, and we didn't have time to do that.
Yeah, you got to remember that Tomb Raider, just to get the combat to be as amazing as it can be for one player is a huge challenge to begin with. To adapt that, to keep the fun working for multiple players is another challenge. So yes, it would have been a great idea to have AI in there, but right now let's make sure that we have players versus players having fun, and then who knows in the future what happens.
All right,
Other questions?
next question.
Will all multiplayer modes be like objective based, or will it also be like basic team deathmatch kind of deal?
Go for it.
Yeah, basically we have 2 modes that are objective-based, asymmetric, but one of the elements we mentioned, like the familiar yet different, that's one of the elements we decided to do a team deathmatch, which was really normal because it's something that could be easier for the player to jump in. There's no objective, they just have those matches that they can start handling the mechanics, the fighting, learn the maps, and then obviously a mode with objective is more complex to understand. So we have 4 modes. 2 are those objective-based mode. We have team deathmatch, and we have a free-for-all mode with some special twist in it.
Yeah. It's, again, part of this easy to get into, right? Maybe some of you guys have played, again, probably not you guys in here because you look like you're some pretty badass multiplayer gamers, but for some people that have heard what a team deathmatch is, a free-for-all is, it's easy to get into a mode that is easy to cooperate with, and all of a sudden jump in a free-for-all or jump into a team deathmatch, and then maybe try your luck at team deathmatch in Halo or whatever if you want to give it a shot. But for us, again, very important, easy to get into.
All right, next question.
So this probably sounds like a silly question, but
there are no. Don't start with this. Probably there are no silly questions. We asked.
Yeah,
them
but
all
I
in the
mean, you
beginning.
talked about the game for a while there, and my
Yeah.
question is, what do you actually do in the multiplayer? So,
Great question.
like actual,
Alex,
like what do
you
you
wanna go through the whole
actually
thing
do?
again?
What's
What
what's
do we
the
do?
team kind of set up? What do you do? Do you have different roles?
That's a
Do
great
you have-
question. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that
so
is a
that's
very
my
good
question.
question because we might have gone into the detail, but I'm pretty sure. How many of you guys actually are curious about that? Right? So it wasn't a stupid. Yeah, obviously it wasn't a stupid question, Alex. Tell them globally what the objectives are.
So, for the survivor, it's different objective by modes. The base of the gameplay for survivor, when it's objective-based mode, is to find a way either to survive or get off the island. And to do that, they really need to work together. They have access to different type of weapon. They have different type of loadout. I think one of the elements, it's not role-based like Battlefield where you really have a medic, someone to revive. Everyone has access on the survivor side to the same type of weapons, skills, and tools. they can select the one they want, and they work together to be able to, for the example, in rescue, it's to bring back a medkit to the base, so someone needs to get it, the other one will try to cover him, trying to kill the scavenger that will come close as he carry back the medkit. On the scavenger side, since they are also called the Sodari, their goal is pretty much, they are the ones that are on the island, they are defending the island, they want the survivors to just not be there, so they try to kill them. So it's really, again, it's the same type, they have access to all the Sodari weapons, and they try to eliminate the survivors that are on the island. So basically the match is really that confrontation where you have that group of survivors that tries to find a way to survive and get out of the island, and those other guys that will use their weapons, bow, rifles, melee attacks to try to kill them and get rid of them.
Is that, yeah? Cool.
Next question.
Could we get one or two examples of like a challenge that came up with the balancing, that, you know, like some issue that came up when you were kind of working out the balance of the multiplayer modes?
Yeah.
And then like sort of how you kind of identified the problem and sort of solved it or whatever, like through design.
Yeah. I'll give you one, then Alex, maybe you can give him another one. One of the biggest challenges is literally the objective placement. So let's say you got to put a med pack somewhere and bring it back to home base. Where is home base? Where's the med pack? Is it easy for one team to get them back to the home base? Is it easier for one team to eliminate the people that are trying to get the med pack? You know what I mean? Like little challenge. We literally went through passes where we were moving things by inches just to make things easier or more difficult for one side or another. And the most satisfying thing, and obviously, Alex, you can give another example. The most satisfying thing that we've seen when giving the game or giving the gamepad to someone that's never played it, and let's say a group of 6 people, is seeing how they were still able to keep the matches really close. Because, you know, you can't underestimate the amount of enhancement the game goes through when you've play tested it, when the team's given it a shot, when players that have reached a certain hours of experience have played it, when people that have never played it play it, and then over and over and over again, people that play this type of game, people that play, you know, the Assassins and the Uncharted's, and people that play the Call of Duties and the Halos, what happens when they play the game? Who's having an easier time? Who's having a harder time? So for us, just going through iterations of that and adapting for player A or player B was probably one of the biggest challenges, to make sure that the experience is balanced no matter who's playing it. Alex?
Before going to a specific example, I think in general what was a challenge is the fact that we had so many variables coming into the balance, since we had different weapons, different modes that were working in different layout. In terms of layout, the maps that we have, they really feel different. Some are way more open, others closed. So often the issue that we were having is to see that in some combination, we end up with a map where if people are good long range, they just totally dominate and the other team has nothing to do to be able to win. And I'll go to a more specific example, and that's something that I went briefly on in the presentation for the rescue mode, where you need to bring back a med pack. At the beginning, the scavenger were not forced to go and do a medikill to execute a survivor when they were down. And that was creating a huge challenge, balance issue, because when we were making the map balance, the team that was the best was always winning by a great margin. So yes, the best team was always winning. It wasn't necessarily advantaging one side, but it was black and white, because on some of the maps that were more open, we either, when Joe was talking about objective placement, when we were placing the medkit closer, if they were good, they were just capturing it without the other being able to react. If it was longer, if it was good player long range, they were just decimating the Sodari were decimating the survivors on the way back. So we were always, as soon as we were touching the objective placement, it was completely going off. And that's where, doing some experimentation, we go back to the mechanic and add that execution that you needed to go in melee. So often the solution for the balance was not just the balance of the objective, but just to rethink what was the objective of the mode. So that's one of the examples. Other elements, we had maps that were more tight, where the shotgun was way too powerful because you were able to closely defend some of the points. The solution we use for that is that we added a different defensive skill where you're way more resistant only against shotgun pellet. So if the player is able to learn the game more, he'll know that to play in that map, that skills should have it. So that way, it's really by giving often tools that adjusted because we had so many variables, so different maps, that making sure that each one of those objectives that are placed in different places in the map, and all the different weapons were always working. It was really a matter to make sure that if there's a dominating strategy, there's a counter for it.
All right, next question.
Hi. I was
Hey.
wondering,
What's up?
why did you decide to include character progression as opposed to maybe having all abilities unlocked from the get-go or something along those lines?
That is the question Alex has been dying to answer all night. Alex, all you, buddy. Quickly.
There's several reasons, but it's something that we found that was working great with the aspect. First of all, there's that aspect in single player as well, where Lara will gain skills, progress. So it was a natural progression that if it's there in single player, it makes sense in multiplayer as well. And based on the team that we had, a lot of the elements that we were investigating at the beginning is to make sure that, okay, those survivors are stranded on the island, they don't know how to survive yet, and as they stay there longer, they get more and more tools to be able to survive until they become those ultimate survivors, being able to defend themselves properly. So that was the high-level reason behind it, that why it was making sense. On top of it, I think it's really important to have a strong reward system to entice the player to come back, to progress, to discover new elements in the game. And since we took an approach where as you level up, you get different weapons that are more specialized, I think it's something that's also useful so that at the beginning when the player gets in, he doesn't need to choose between 20 weapons. He only have a couple one already planned for him. So as he learns the game, he has more and more options, and that ease the getting in the game as well.
Next.
Hello, it's a different kind of question. It's not about gameplay. I'm a character modeler, so I'd like to know about character progression artistically and psychologically. How did you reach this level of Lara Croft in this game? I don't know if you can reply my question. Like, how did you decide to stop on this character design exactly?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sure. You know, Lara Croft is obviously a huge character. She's been in 2 movies, God knows how many games, I lost count. And nobody really knows how she becomes who she is, right? Like, yes, she's got confidence. Yes, she's strong. She's adventurous. But how, right? Me personally, when I first joined the project, I was, that's what I thought I wanted to know about this. I think I figured out that she's a great treasure hunter, that she, travels all over the world, but how do you make that approachable? And there's a lot of, if you look at a lot of films that are coming out, a lot of TV series, they try to approach heroes in a more human way. James Bond is a good idea, right? With the whole Daniel Craig era. And then you got the whole Batman with the Dark Knight saga. So Spider-Man, right? A lot of characters are being developed so that you feel like they could exist. Obviously not the Avengers, because that's a whole different story. But Batman, really. They don't have him be, even the previous Batmans, he was kind of relatable, but with the Dark Knight series, you can imagine someone existing in that shape. It'll be kind of funny to see him running around with a bat suit, but hey, it can exist a lot more than in the past. Same thing with James Bond, right? Personally, I love the older James Bond. I love where it was about the cars, the action, the surreal stuff, but it was a superhero that was, he went through a bunch of action without ever getting his suit dirty, right? And now, Daniel Craig is a lot more relatable. He's human. For Lara, it was the same story. She gets her confidence. She becomes the character that we all know and that we've seen and we've heard about and that we've seen her played. But she needs to go through certain events in her life, like a lot of you guys for real life, right? How do you get your confidence? You go through the tougher periods, you go through the tougher stages of your life, and then eventually you learn. You learn from the tough parts of your life, and then you become, Batman or whatever in your head. For me, right? I'm Batman every night when I'm at home. But for real, there are experiences that someone that's as heroic as Lara needs to goes through to become confident like that. And that was the story we wanted to tell with Tomb Raider, was basically how did she become the person that she is or that you know today. And let's tell that story. Let's see how she does. Let's see what she goes through. She's thrown on an island. She's lost without her friends. She's got to go regroup with her friends who are alive, which she hears about. But is that, you're on an island by yourself, excuse me. What do? Like, you need to regroup. You need to find the confidence to do the tough decisions, to be adventurous, and then eventually grow. And that's what basically this reimagining of Tomb Raider was about, making a Lara Croft that can exist in real life, that is accessible, that you guys and girls can see yourselves in some form or another, and then eventually see how she becomes a little bit more of a surreal character.
All right. Next question.
Hi, 2 questions. First question is, which platform will the game be on? And second question, which camera view did you use for multiplayer? Like third person, first person, and why?
That was an easy one. I can get that one, Alex. Not much design on that one. First of all, it's coming out on PS3, PC, and Xbox 360. And it is third person, for the simple reason that it is still a character-based game. You can pull off character-based game in first person, but once you've gotten to know characters in the single player, which is what you do basically, you play the characters that you've met and seen in single player, you will basically replay with them in the multiplayer, and you probably have an easier way to do that by actually seeing the characters that you've seen. So in the sense that in some games work really well in first person, that wasn't the approach that we were trying to do for this multiplayer. And the game is, imagine a Lara Croft single player game in first person. Who would buy that, right? All you guys? No?
And that's something that
you would? Really? You'd buy a first person Tomb Raider? Shame on you, dude. Shame. No, I'm kidding. One day, maybe.
And just to add on that, that's something we wouldn't have done different within single player. Once the player played through the single player campaign, he's used to that type of camera, that type of control. I know other game did it, where it's third person, and then you go in first person for the multiplayer, to name Splinter Cell. But we felt that it would have been too jarring. It was too important also, like all the traversal, the verticality, the platforming. Yes, it's possible to do in first person, but it's way better in third person, and we have a lot of that in multiplayer.
All right. Okay, 3 more questions we'll do.
Hi, so it's a double question. So how many maps you got in multiplayer, and what kind of maps you have? Is it just open maps and closed maps, or do you have a more subtle classification?
I'm not going to tell you how many maps we have. It's part of the fun of buying the game, isn't it? That's it. All right. I got nothing else. What was your second question? I'm sorry?
There's 5 maps.
What?
I listen to people, Joe.
That's why you never get a game designer to talk, ever. They like to reveal everything.
Hey.
There you go, 5 maps.
I know that Tomb Raider came first, but do you guys ever worry from a design point of view? Like, how do we compete with Uncharted?
Thanks, man. I've been dying to hear that one. Yes, obviously, the comparison is there. And it's fine. Don't laugh. It's a good question. We got that 200 times last time we were talking to the press. It's a legit question. No. Don't be sorry. It's a very good question. The characters are different in that, not just the character, the direction each franchise takes are different. Nathan Drake is this confident treasure hunter, and all their multiplayer is based on that. For us, it's about literally what Alex just talked about, survival. Getting teams to work together to reach an objective. And that means presenting them with obstacles that will force them to work together to reach those objectives. So yeah, obviously, if you think about the name Tomb Raider, maybe you want to go raid tombs. This Tomb Raider is about Lara Croft's story and indirectly her story of survival. So that's what we wanted to bring for multiplayer, which I don't know about you guys. I don't think Uncharted does survival. They do collecting treasure. I haven't played multiplayer in Uncharted, by the way. I'm like, no. I will not play this. I'm kidding. I played a little bit. I couldn't, right? Because I heard so much about it that it was really cool. But Uncharted probably had the same questions we got when they released multiplayer in Uncharted 2. Why do it, right? And maybe their take was it. I didn't hear a lot about what they did, but let's allow players to collect treasures together and whatever. But for us, the theme of survival and the theme of presenting these intimidating environments, whether it's the environment themselves or the other team that's threatening you, really, brings the game, the matches a lot closer. Brings the experience a lot closer between players. You start depending on the other player. You start talking about, communicating. which I'm a big fan of. I'm a huge fan of like taking the game outside of the box and just kind of getting players to talk about it, to, like I said earlier, whatever, tweet, Facebook, and even talk face to face. I mean, yes, let's get off of Facebook and let's get off of Twitter and go talk to your friend about what the hell just happened. I do that with this guy all the time when we play. Dude, you didn't save my ass and we lost because of that, and that grenade is too powerful, the shotgun's too powerful, bring the values down. No, because you suck. So, but that being said, there are two different games, and I believe there's place for both of them to exist, and Nathan Drake's character arc, is not Lara Croft's. Maybe the way that you... What? Someone say it is? It isn't. Play the game. But that being said, there's a lot of respect for what Naughty Dog has done. Their insistence on quality is inspirational. And at the same time, we think that Lara's story and the theme of survival in our game makes for a lot more of interesting multiplayer experiences between players.
So if there is one thing during the production that you
really?
can just...
You're on the team, dude. Why are you asking me a question?
I know, but I have a question still. If
Yeah,
there's
go
one
ahead.
thing during the world production that you can just do over again, just start from scratch and redo it, what would it be?
Repeat the question? If there was one thing
That you can
we could
redo
redo
all
from
over
scratch?
again. Yeah.
Oh, Fred.
What's the part you worked on?
Fred. By the way,
Okay,
guys, this is Fred. He's one of our lead QA guys that basically helped us get the game out. And if you guys caught the news, the game is gold. It's because of our friends right over there that helped us get the buzz. Right there, yeah, for sure. Round of applause for you guys.
All right. Okay, we'll do two more questions. Are you actually going to answer that one? Or?
I can.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I'll answer really quickly. Fred, the one thing that I would do probably different is get into the process a lot earlier. Get in. If they were reimagining a reboot, hopefully 2 years would have, and make decisions right from the get-go that you don't change. We've experimented a lot in the beginning, which led to a lot of the successes that we did, but also cost us time. Be strong with the direction that you take. Stick to it. Make sure that you know where you're going with your quality, and don't change course.
Awesome. Okay.
You were saying that Tomb Raider, the reboot, is all about Lara's story and how she became what she is. Then why keep the title Tomb Raider and not just call it Lara Croft or something?
Because she's a Tomb Raider.
But if there's no Tomb Raiding in the game...
How do you know there isn't any? There might be.
Well, you kind of end that way. That wasn't about Tomb Raider, it was about all Lara Croft.
The art of deception. I'm good at it. No, yeah, there is... Just play the game.
But we are recording
Comes out
this.
next month, guys. Come on.
Okay, last question.
So, multiplayer, very complex type of thing. You've got a lot of aspects to have on your brain. Level design, character design, ability design. What came first, and how was it influenced by what came later? Because you talked a lot about level design and how that iterated a lot. I was wondering how these things shaped each other.
Share that one. Go for it.
Honestly, it's something that you cannot just do one after the other. They go together. When we were looking at the direction that we were taking, what is a Tomb Raider multiplayer match? We needed to experience different type of layout, different type of ability, different type of objective. So when we were trying to define it, it was more as a whole package. What's the experience we wanted to get? And so if you just try to do one part first, it would be hard. So once you have that experimentation, you're able to, obviously, then you determine more what are your character abilities, and that we had some of the answers since single player started before us, so we had the basis on that. And after that, but what was the specific one for multiplayer and the objective? We did iteration at the same time that we were doing iteration for level until we determined them, and once they were determined, then we were using those, what are those abilities, objective, to build the next levels that we needed to do.
One more right here, because I think you wanted to lay... What did you want to ask, Christian?
Who,
Nothing.
you?
Go ahead, Christian. Ask me that tricky question that you've been dying to ask.
Hit detection. Is it server or client based?
God damn it. Christian's on our team, by the way, guys. Yeah, I'm not going to answer that, Christian, because you know I'm going to make a mistake when I answer it. I'm not going to pretend I'm a programmer, because I'm not. That's it. Yeah, we're good.
All right, well, big thanks to Joe and Alex.